Okay. Another point that I keep seeing brought up is measurable.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that CrossFit is measurable over time? Not for the athlete, we're not quite there yet, but for just the everyday person. When I think about measurable, again, coming from the strength and conditioning background, or predictable. I don't think you can predict anything with CrossFit if it is to be constantly varied. I don't think that you can predict that you're going to get stronger at your 1RM back squat if you're not practicing the skill of 1RM, getting the neurological adaptation to it, things of that nature. I don't think that you can get a predictably get now I have to split hairs. Obviously, the person who's obese or the person who's like over fat,
yeah,
and then they lose weight, they're going to get better at their 1 mile. It's just going to happen, right?
Sure.
Over time. But the person who comes in that's already semi-fit, right? Like me, I came into CrossFit. I had a past of powerlifting. I had a past of strongman, bodybuilding, all these different things that I competed in. I didn't predictably get better at anything unless it was a new stimulus. So like Olympic weightlifting, I didn't do before. So predictably, I was going to get better. But with some of this stuff, I'm like, is it predictable? I don't see that it could be.
I would say if you're going to compare it to a pure strength sport where that's the only thing you're focusing on and you're writing progressions to get better at that thing, no, it's not as predictable. There's an assumption that if you show up every day and you're touching on all of these things over time, that we will see these stimuli often enough that you will get better over time. But it's not as quick and it's not as linear, and so I think it becomes harder to predict. And I think that the more well trained you are, the more fleeting those things can be, which is the same in every sport.
Yeah.
But it also may just suggest that like, hey, maybe the things that you needed to improve the most for your health weren't those things. So you are getting better, just not in those areas, and you like those areas because that's your sporting background.
Yeah.
But you're improving your aerobic fitness, you're improving your muscular endurance and these other things that from a health perspective are helping balance you out more and make you healthier overall, rather than taking you from a 400-pound back squat to a 420-pound back squat, which would be cool to have and you want to be stronger, but that's not the intention of CrossFit from a health perspective.
Yeah, so I got largely worse at powerlifting coming into CrossFit, which it doesn't bother me. Like I used to squat 500, 515 or whatever, and now I squat 405 for a couple on a good day. And my deadlift is nowhere near what I was, but I was also like 30, 40 pounds heavier.
Yep.
And found out that I was actually pretty good at...
You went from training powerlifting regularly to doing CrossFit. Now, where do you think you would have been at if you went from doing powerlifting to doing nothing? Would you have gotten even worse?
I probably would have got better. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing. There's no way.
So I just think that all of these things exist on a spectrum, and it's not to refute what you're saying at all.
No.
Yeah.
Please do. If you hear something, please do.
But if you go from regularly strength training and you're heavier and you're doing it 2 to 3 times a week regularly and you're not doing things that would necessarily maybe interfere with your strength stimulus, you're probably going to lose some of that. Just the same as like when we peak for an event, we're often at our strength to a point that we're not at 4 weeks after that when we're back into a base phase, right? You're not optimized for that thing. But I think that it keeps you like, I've used this analogy with somebody before of like when we're doing CrossFit, I've used this with my athletes even, or they're used to training two sessions a day. We take an off season, they're training 1 session a day. They don't feel as fit overall as they are, but they're 8 weeks out from being back to where they would want to be.
Yeah.
Right? I think that I would assume that you are still healthy and strong to a point where if you wanted to dive back into powerlifting, you're only 8 to 12 weeks out from feeling close to where you were again. And you may even find that through becoming more well-rounded, you actually had a better base to be even better than you were before. Maybe.
No, I would actually probably agree with you, right? Because it's just about like, there's certain things in CrossFit that I think a lot of coaches don't really, not to their fault, well, maybe to their fault a little bit, but I just think that a lot of them don't really have the same type of, this is going to sound like kind of cocky or whatever, but they don't have like as much education in strength and conditioning. So I think that some of these terms and stuff can get muddy, but I don't think that, for me at least, when I listen to some of these coaches talk, I'm like, oh, you really haven't spent that much time in like the actual strength and conditioning world, because it's like, anytime that you question anything that has to do with the methodology, you don't like, all you say is you don't understand the methodology, and it's like you can't appeal to authority in your world, but we'll appeal to authority in our world, as in like we're gonna go refer to the L1 now, we're gonna refer to the L2. Okay, but what about these studies like in the exercise world? Well, no, we don't care about that because that's not what the methodology says. Do you?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah,
I went away a little bit from what you were just saying, but yeah. So I think
to the CrossFitters' credit, a lot of the arguments that they make, by and large, are meant to attack the people who are not currently serving themselves from a health and fitness standpoint.
I agree.
And I think that's why so many people get into an argument when they are an expert in whatever level of strength or fitness that they work in. If they're in strength conditioning, if they're in CrossFit, they're in other things. Like, we're splitting hairs and we're arguing about the thing that this was not intended to be for.
Yeah,
it was intended to look at sick people who are not active, who are not moving, and figure out the best way that we could serve them on a broad scale.
What do you think CrossFit, what do you think the magic of CrossFit actually is, besides the community aspect? I have a theory on it, but I want to hear yours.
No, you got to give me your theory.
Okay.
And then I'll push back.
All right,
if I
please.
have one, or I'll give you another point.
Sure. So community is number one. Actually, community I would say is number two. The first thing that I think is the magic pill about CrossFit is it teaches people who didn't know how to work out or who weren't working out already, or that weren't working out hard, like your average everyday, let's just use the term bodybuilder, although I don't think you're a bodybuilder unless you compete in bodybuilding.
Sure.
It taught those people how to exercise intensely, or see what intensity means, that had never experienced intensity before.
Yeah.
And that's what I think makes the adaptation and the change.
And that's the importance of having the clock.
Yeah.
And measuring these things.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that it's forcing you, whether you think that you're racing your clock or not, or racing other people or not, I think it pushes you out of your comfort zone.
Yep.
And I do think that that's when we talk about CrossFit as being an optimal general approach for building strength and building movement competency and building endurance and stuff. It's the ability to take any of these movements, ones that we think of from the strength world, ones that we think of from the endurance world, from the gymnastics world and stuff, and put them into a scenario where we're also getting aerobic intensity. And so we're able to maximize what we can do in 15 minutes most of the time for a workout.
Yeah.
I think that's the magic, is like how densely we're able to pack things into a very small package that everybody has time for.
Yes. Okay. So that's another really good point for CrossFit. And by the way, I'm on CrossFit's side. I just want to be the devil's advocate, right?
Sure.
But I think that there's a lot of holes in the arguments. So I agree with you. I think what CrossFit does is it gives you the most bang for your buck in terms of time. That doesn't mean that I think it's the end all be all, because even if you look at the intensity principles that CrossFit uses, bodybuilders and other forms, you can't call it modalities. I know I'm like so like, you know, bodybuilders have been using the concepts of time under tension forever. And if you watch a real bodybuilder train for 40 minutes, it looks just as hard, if not harder, than a CrossFit class workout does. If you ask my girlfriend, I put her on a bodybuilding glute program for the past 3 weeks, she'll tell you, why is bodybuilding so hard? And I go, because you've never exercised like this when you thought of bodybuilding before. You've done your accessory movements and you've done 3 sets of 8 rows, but you've never actually touched failure.
Yeah, it's intense.